Safety Share, a webinar series brought to you by CIM Magazine and the CIM Health and Safety Society. I am your organizer, Michelle Beacom, Managing Editor of CIM Magazine. Today's presentation is a CIM Fatality Prevention Initiative update and is sponsored by Pan American Silver. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. To ensure you have optimal audio, if you joined by computer, please make sure you've selected the computer audio button. If you joined by phone, make sure you've selected the phone button. If you have any questions during the presentation, please select the question mark and type your question into the question box. The questions will be held until the Q&A period after the presentation. Thank you for everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are excited to be partnering with the Health and Safety Society to be able to bring this series to you. I'm very happy to have Nelson Bondarchuk with us today. Nelson has over 20 years of mining leadership experience across engineering, operations, construction, capital projects, and organizational transformation in the mining industry, and he currently serves as Vice President of People and Systems at Fuerte Metals, working to develop the Coffee Gold project in the Yukon. Welcome, Nelson.
Thanks, Michelle, and welcome everybody today for joining us. I know we usually do these things at 1 p.m. It's a little bit earlier than usual, but some of us have a Workplace Safety North meeting at 1 o'clock today that we're presenting at. So we moved the time today, and we've got a great panel of volunteers. Well, there's a mix of volunteers and some future paid folks coming online here. So I'll introduce the folks that are joining us today that have been helping us with the Fatality Prevention Initiative for CIM HSS, starting with Lori-Ann Fleming, who is that's the different title on the thing there, but Lori-Ann Fleming works with Epiroc as, I believe, Lori-Ann, you're help me out with the title again. It's the lead or manager, director.
Live work elimination project or program manager.
Right. Yeah, live work elimination. So expert in the field on SIF prevention and working with a large company, especially with the folks that are providing the equipment for, they're competing with other companies as well. But there's a lot of SIF prevention to be done in those companies. And Lori-Ann graduated from Cambrian College, geological engineering technologist, and 40 years experience in the mining industry, extremely passionate about this project in particular. And she's done a great job as our director of partnerships. We'll move on to the next slide here. Next, enthusiastic volunteer we have with us, Emily Tetzlav, PhD graduate. I worked with Emily in past years in a past role with implementing some pretty cool technology on fatality prevention. She's recently graduated from the University of Ottawa, received her doctorate in research affiliated with Climate Change and Innovation Bureau of Canada. She worked with them. And we just talked about the fatigue risk management program that we had implemented at Torex together when we were there. And since then, she's entered the mining industry. And she's I want to say the head scientist, but she's the principal scientist EHS at Wenco International Systems. And she's also one of our long-term volunteers on this project who's been working on building standards and helping us make sure that we've got data consistency in what we're about to build. And also the big focus that she's going to be talking about today is the survey that we've sent out for the industry folks to fill out so we can gather that data and based on what we're building on some actual data. Next slide. I believe we've got Warner next, or Michael Hartley. He's the non-volunteer. We're about to sign a deal with Michael and his company at Interology Mining and Energy. He's the managing director there. With 25 years experience in the oil and gas, mining, construction, manufacturing. I've worked with Michael in the past developing software. His team went through a pretty rigorous selection program led by our RFP process, led by Lori-Ann Fleming and Warner. And his team came out on top, and we're glad to be partnering with these folks. And hopefully in the first half of next year, we'll have a working beta that we can show off at the CIM Connect conference. Next slide. And last but not least, my second in command on this journey, Warner All. He's the president of All Consulting, and with more than 30 years experience, senior in the resource sector. He's one of those folks you go to for wisdom. And Warner's almost, I'd say, the most passionate person on this project and helps drive us forward. He's definitely our heart when it comes to keeping the pace on this thing moving forward. Again, he's got experience in the Americas, Europe, Australia, you name it. I think most people on the phone today would know most of these faces. They're very connected folks. They're also very passionate. And I like to call us a scrappy and volunteer team. It's a passionate, scrappy team of volunteers that we're working with here. And that's what's helping us keep the pace of this project moving forward. Nobody's really getting paid. We haven't spent any money on this yet. So that's what the interesting part is. So if we go to the next slide, Michelle, I'll kick off into I've got a quick 5-minute presentation for folks just to give an update. This was delivered and approved by the CIM Council. And so we have buy-in from those folks. And after I finish this presentation, we'll do a little bit of a roundtable update from everybody on the team on their aspect, why they joined the project and what they're focused on to help drive this thing forward. We'll be talking a little bit about how we keep this thing sustainable. This type of thing has been tried in the past in our industry, but it's never been funded. It's usually been a volunteer team that does something for a year or two, or it's been something through an academic institution that's developed something that hasn't stuck long term or hasn't been updated in a few years. So we move to the next slide. This is the overall kind of key milestones and cost resource schedule that we're looking at for this project. In the first half of this year, we actually formed the team after a few years, there was about 18 months of project development. And there's lots of famous quotes out there saying, plan 90% of the time, execute 10 versus, you avoid all the rework. But what we're really focused on is in Q3 of this year, we initiated the formal planning we completed the formal planning process, pulled the team together, and then figured out what we had in the bank that the Health and Safety Society raised some funds over the last 3 years. We decided we were going to spend it towards, invested in the industry by creating this centralized database of serious injuries and fatalities, starting with fatalities. And the goal this year, which we've executed on, and we're in the process of completing, we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's as we prepare to start work in January, is the MOU with, or the contract with the selected vendor, which we have on the call today from IK Mining Systems. And we've got a CapEx of just under 100,000 for this year to get this thing off the ground. And that includes legal and, other aspects, but most of it's focused on software development, and then pulling a team together. And the key here is the last 6 months of this year, we've got a lot of support and a lot of buy-in. We've got buy-in from the right areas in CIM National. So, part of our team includes the CFO, an IT resource, and a PM coordinator from CIM. In the first half of next year, we'll be looking at launching what I call a beta of this project so we can test it out. And we just got off a call yesterday with Dr. Joshua Tepper from Tech, and they've sent us their information that they were already have approved through lawyers that they were going to send to ICMM. And so we're looking to partner with ICMM. Lori will talk a little bit about that in a moment. And eventually we'll have the container built through Michael's team, and then we'll have some test data from Tech. And then we'll be reaching out to other mining companies across Canada. And I think the statistic that I'm always quoting is, over 80% of the mining companies in the world are based in Canada. And I think 80 to 90% of those are based in Toronto. So, and the rest of them are in Vancouver. Now, I don't want to forget about Alberta and the oil and gas folks, but there's, when you look at hard rock mining, those are the two cities. And then you look at Alberta and that covers the rest of it. And we've got a lot of excited parties that would be interested in partnering with us on this project. And so I think in the first quarter of next year, we'll be working with some legal folks to sort out the data sharing agreements that we'll have to share so that we can get the right anonymized data into the database so that we can publish it. And then, post 2026, what does that look like moving forward? Again, the deal we're looking to sign with Michael's team is probably going to be a 3 to 5 year term. It hasn't quite been hammered out yet, but we're getting there, and it'll be a multi-year deal. And then the team that ends up, taking over from this group of volunteers for the Health and Safety Society will then negotiate the next 3-year contract and the next 3-year contract. So we're looking to keep this thing going for time and eternity, in my opinion. And the point of it is to prevent people from dying at work, right? Especially in the mining industry. And we've had other industries approach us. We're not opposed to working with other industries. We've had waste management companies approach us. And of course, oil and gas and mining go hand in hand with the CIM. And then there's a few other industries out there, that construction, that we're interested in talking to, that we've had a few contacts with over the summer, but we want to get something built first. So that's really the goal for 2026. On the next slide, we'll see a little bit of what the first kind of half of the year looks like from a software design perspective, and then the back half of the year going into Q3 as we launch this thing public. There's this typical design and discovery, architecture planning, configuration. Now, when Michael talks about his schedule, it'll probably be a little bit more condensed than that. I've scheduled this working with the volunteer team to make sure that we've got enough slack in the schedule for those of us not only on the call today, but the folks in the HSS, and most folks in all of the CIM societies are volunteers. They've got day jobs, and they're passionate about mining, or passionate about SIF, or passionate about both, and they're spending their weekends and their weekends, lunch hours, and off hours of work focused on helping to improve the industry. So really thankful for the team we have, and extremely proud of what we've accomplished so far in such a short amount of time, even though we haven't actually built anything yet. So looking forward to next year and building that. And then the last slide that I have for you folks today is really focused on, I would say, what I've proposed is the commercial model. And the reason for this is sustainability. We've looked at a few other organizations that have tried this in the past. We're not for profit. I personally don't believe that bow ties and databases of, information about serious injuries and fatalities should be a secret. They should be, the right data should be made public so that everybody can learn from it. We've got I don't know how many junior mining companies there are on the TSXV, but there's a whack of them. There's, I'm sure, 100 of them if I counted. And somebody will have to quote me on that and maybe could correct me in the comments later. But we've got a ton of companies out there that could benefit from something like this if we publish the data. And we are looking at partnerships with the University of Queensland in Australia. For the last 5 years, Dr. Maureen Hassel's been working on publishing bow ties in the mining industry, and focusing on, for instance, if you have a fatal risk of fall from heights, there will be 3 or 5 critical controls that you should have in place every time a work from height project goes on. There's definitions around that. And so the back end of this project, within that, on the last slide, you saw the first half of the year we're developing this thing. So the first half of that will be creating the database, creating the dashboard, developing something that could be consumed online publicly. And then the back half of that dashboard, or the second phase of that, will be creating or publishing standardized bow ties down the road, along with a process for companies to follow. And our partner companies who sign on with CIM, it helps fund this project, and it'll also help inform the bow ties. So those partner companies will pay to help inform the bow ties and improve the industry. And so that's really getting to the crux of why I think CIM exists. There's lots of great things CIM does, and this is going to be one of them in the future moving forward. And I know the council's excited about this project when they approved it, and the team is excited to be part of it as well. And I think with that, I will stop talking. We're right at 12:15, so Thanks for that, Michelle. I'll turn it over to Warner, who's I guess I'm the chair, the person, I call myself the project manager on this, but I'm the lead person on this, kind of organizing how we integrate things. And Warner's my second in command. I'll turn it over to Warner to introduce himself and correct anything I got wrong when I was introducing him, as well as give his version of the update for folks.
Sure. Last name is Ewell. If you're from Texas, it's Ewell. So anyways, just a couple of things. In Vancouver, there's over 960 mining companies. In Toronto, there's about 500. So those are the two main centers in Canada. So you got over 1,100 mining companies, just to give you some perspective. But you've read my bio. I've been doing this for a long period of time. I actually operated a couple mining companies, so I know, how difficult it is to get something from exploration into actual production. And the reason that I got involved with this thing, I happened to be on a mine in British Columbia where there was a fatality, a haul truck interaction with a light vehicle, and it could easily have been avoided. And the frustrating part is that happened 7 years ago, and the information still hasn't come up to date. Where I worked down in Australia, when they have a fatality, the information comes out in 3 days. In the United States, you've got MSHA, where the information comes out in about a week. In Canada, it's taken 6 to 8 years before we get the coroner's report. And the coroner's report doesn't always happen on a fatality. They pick and choose which ones they want to do the reports on. Canada's got some concerns about liability issues, and as Nelson mentioned, hopefully doing this by making it relatively anonymous, it'll get around some of those liability issues. The main thing that we're trying to do is, if something happened, let's get some of the details out as to what happened, and then put steps in place so it doesn't happen again. I mean, it's a big tragedy. It happened in Australia, where they had a site where they had a tire repair being done, and an individual was killed overflating the tire, and the same thing happened a week later in another location. So we're trying to prevent that. And the other frustrating thing is there's only 2 to 3 fatalities on average. It's not good, but there's only 2 or 3 fatalities on average in Canada. And, getting that information out shouldn't be that difficult. So I'm really looking forward, and it's been a pleasure working with all the people on this team. We're all volunteering our time, but I'm really looking forward to actually getting this thing implemented. It's been talked about for 3 years. It should have been done 3 years ago. So, and Michael, just so you know, I called all your references. You got glowing references. So we're pretty excited to be working with your company, and looking forward to getting the dashboard set up that Emily's going to be putting together, and getting the surveys out. And then hopefully when something happens in the next couple of days after an incident, we can get that information out, not only for fatalities, but for serious incidents, just like the miners that were stuck underground for a period of time in one of the mines in British Columbia here. So that's where we're going. And Nelson, thank you so much for your leadership, herding all the cats, getting us going, organized, and getting us to where we are today.
Thanks for that, Warner. I'm going to move on next to Lorianne, and I want to get her title right. Live Work Elimination Program Manager at Epiroc.
Yeah. Epiroc's famous for the longer titles. Apparently, the longer the title, the better you are. So I like to have a long one. But all joking aside, I think you've asked us sort of to say why we're joined the initiative, why this is important to us, and I think that's really important for the people on the call to hear. This is motivated not for a business reason; it's for a very personal reason for me. I've worked in the mining industry, as you've heard, for about 40 years. That's a long time. Started my career underground, working as a geologist. I've worked for Atlas Copco and then Epiroc, and roles, a lot of around business management, sales and marketing, equipment supply, technology, very involved in the technology space, and probably trying to think about now, it's probably 15, 20 years ago, my husband had an incident underground and he was injured. And everybody says, oh, okay, you've had an incident, you've had an accident, your number on a statistic, and off you go. But it wasn't just him that had the accident. It was the rest of us that now had to deal with it. So it impacted the way that our family lived. It impacted the homes that we bought. It impacted the travel that we were able to do. Everything for the rest of our lives was impacted by that one incident. And I think that's really what we're talking about today. It's that impact of what that decision at that particular time to go ahead and do a task that you ended up getting injured. And it's not just the person that gets injured, it's the entire community. I would say even the entire mining community that is impacted. So we have a duty to help those people that have been hurt and try and figure out a way to prevent it. So that's why I'm very passionate about it. And as I said, it's very personal, but it's also part of what I do at work. So for me, it really leads into how I work with technology and safety across Epiroc. And so when I heard about the initiative, it was like, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to do for my company. But now I can do it for my industry. And that I think is really a really good reason to say, yeah, let's work together. So Director of Partnerships is really about how do we get people on board? And I think telling our stories is one way to get people on board, but also, you know, addressing those very real perceived and actual concerns around liability. So Warner, you talked about that. And it's about saying the data we're collecting is not personal. I don't want to know anybody's name. I don't want to know any detail around your name or who you are. I want to know what happened. So I can take a very broad example, like a large utility truck backing up, raising the box and hitting an electrical wire, and someone gets an electrical shock. That's the kind of information we need. I don't need to know who you are, whether you're male or female or how old you are. The more you know, the better you can assess the damage. But at the very least, we need to know what happened. Then we can start communicating that around the industry, because there's nothing worse than, as you said, Warner, one day you hear about an accident, and then 3 days later, somewhere else in the world, it's exactly the same thing. So that's what we want to prevent. So who are we talking to when we talk about partnerships? Well, Nelson, you mentioned ICMM, and Tech has been very generous and very much a leader within the industry and contacting and working with us. But we have a huge opportunity. There's a large membership within the CIM. There's also a large membership that works with the ICMM. And they already collect data, and we have been talking to them about sharing that data. So one of the first avenues that we look at is, if you're sharing the data with the ICMM, please share it with us. We were going to start to contact different companies, different associations, and don't think it's not just mining companies. There's suppliers, OEMs, technology companies, a vast array of companies that work with the CIM and work in the Canadian mining industry. So a lot of opportunities to gather information. So when we come knocking, we would appreciate that you at least listen, and we would love to address your concerns, and would love to really share with you this journey and make sure that nobody else gets hurt. And I think that next would be Emily talking about how we're going to do that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lorianne, for sure. So Emily, pleasure to have you on today. Thanks for making the time. I know you're busy bouncing around to different parts of the world with Wenco. Yeah, tell us about why you joined, and give us an update on how we're doing with this industry-wide survey. And maybe don't forget that part about the approval that you had to go through. That was pretty key, that we do it a certain way. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nelson. So why did I get involved with this? Well, I've been in the industry a little bit less than Warner and Laurie at this point, but about 10 years ago, when I first kind of got introduced to the mining industry, it was because I was really interested in studying accident investigation and safety culture, and was kind of led by the researchers at Crosh up in Sudbury towards the mining industry, because it's just such a dynamic and complex system to study, and that it was going to be the most valuable, and it really was. So my first entry point of studying it was to look at every accident investigation and coroner's report that's occurred in the last 100 years from 5 different countries. And the big takeaway from it, distilling that all down, was just the idea of lost lessons. So that's kind of come with me in all of the different roles that I've now had in the industry, and being on site in Sudbury, and now with Wenco getting to go to sites across the world. It has just been the most solid foundation of wanting to understand why these things reoccur, And then now in my current role being part of interventions, so we know that fatigue often plays a pretty big role in all different types of accidents. And so what I do now in my role is look at how we can harness the technologies that we supply to make sure that we can intervene before these things happen. So when I heard Nelson speaking about this initiative at the CIM Expo last year, I messaged him right away after the conference and wanted to jump on board. And so I'm now proudly the director of standards design. And a big part of the role that I'm doing, like Nelson alluded to, is running a research initiative. So because my role with Wenco and my background is heavily situated in research, this was a really good position for me to hold. And so we are running a national survey, hoping to harness all of the data we can possibly get from practitioners in health and safety and risk management, any supervisors, frontline workers that have an opinion on what this database could look like, and then capture that data, do some pretty rigorous data analysis on it, and then use that information with Michael to help design a database that's truly driven from industry perspective. Now, to do this, we wanted to be as systematic as possible, so we went through full research ethics board's approval with Laurentian University and the Center for Research in Occupational Safety and Health to make sure we had that solid foundation. And then the design of the survey itself had our entire team's opinions driving it, but we wanted to capture things like what are the current state of practice? So what are practitioners currently using? What type of data? How are they getting it? Where are they sourcing it from? Are they using international standards? Any gaps that might occur as well. Then we wanted data information about standardization needs and content needs. What kind of level of detail, like Lorianne was saying, what kind of level of detail do you want, do you need, and are you willing to give? And then, of course, because Canada has all of our different jurisdictions for health and safety, we wanted to capture any of those barriers or concerns within each of the jurisdictions to make sure that we can safeguard and make sure data protection is of course, at the highest level. And then the last sections were just about desired functionality and different features you'd like, kind of reporting initiatives, and how you'd actually like to engage with this system and be trained on it. So what forums and information pathways can we provide education on? But at the end of the day, we're going to take all this data, piece it together, and make sure that the system is as credible as possible, trustworthy as possible, and gives the practitioners what they truly need to not have any more lost lessons. So I'm also going to post into, sorry, I'm going to post into the chat here in a second when Michael's speaking, the link to the survey so that anybody that's on the call that hasn't had a chance to do it can be part of it. Right now we're over 50 for respondents. We'd love to see that get even higher so that we've got diverse opinions and perspectives captured. So please, takes less than 20 minutes to do, and we'd really value your time.
Excellent. Yeah, I was going to say, Emily, don't forget to post that link. So for everybody on the call today, please take that link, share it with your peers. We'd like to get as many voices filling that survey out as possible at any level of any company from a mining and oil and gas perspective on what we should be building, right? We have a good idea of what we want, but we want to verify it against actual data from the industry. And Emily, you mentioned something there about lost lessons. That's, coming back to Warner and Lorianne's reasons and your reason for joining the industry. My big reason is we continue to have preventable fatalities in Canada in particular, but across the industry, where there's these lessons that are lost, and it goes deeper than just lost lessons sometimes. Sometimes there's just teams, humans are fallible, and I think the big four, you mentioned fatigue, the other one's frustration, there's complacency, or what I call boredom. And then there's, you get fatigue, frustration, complacency, and there's one more state of mind that I'm missing right now that people get into when they're not rushing. That's the thing. They're rushing around, trying to get the job done. You skip steps, and then somebody loses an arm, right? Or a tip of a finger, or worse, right? And so, and if I'm sure everybody on the call today and everybody that might be listening in the future would have their own version of the story of that, right? And we've all, if we're in the mining industry, you've definitely had conversations outside of work with people who aren't in the mining industry go, man, such a dangerous industry because they've seen movies and how it's portrayed, right? And so mining's come a long way in the last 100 years. I think most folks on the call would agree that we had definitely plateaued. We've definitely improved, but we've definitely plateaued, and that, you know, lagging metrics are good for improvement to get us to where we're at today, but they only serve to continue the performance we're at. So you have this, like, if you look at the fatality, you have this petering off of fatalities, and then there's always these 1 or 2 spikes. And when you look at most of those spikes, it's preventable data. And so, you know, we've got this team of volunteers that have spoken now. Everybody's passionate. We're moving forward. It's been, I think, 24 to 36, so 2 to 3 years for most folks on the team. I do have to apologize. There's probably some people on the call today that have sent me an email back in, I think it was December last year, after I made my first presentation publicly around this. And I had a good problem. I had about 80 or 90 people like Emily say, I want to be part of the team. And I just didn't have enough time to get back to everybody and say yes or no. So I think I got 80% of those people. I got back to 80% of those people and said, are you in or are you out? And they decided what level of involvement they wanted. And then we formed the team from there. And right now, I think we've got, you know, in leadership positions, we have about 10 people. Volunteer-wise, we have about 20 or 30 active. And those folks will be doing everything from verifying data down the road to, you know, helping with developing standardized bow ties to pulling together some of the data that Emily's survey, you know, analyzing that data from the survey. So before we actually make informed decisions on building. So that then transitions the discussion to, well, how are we actually going to do this? How are we going to build this? I've been accused over my career of putting software as the Band-Aid solution over things. I'm happy with that. I love software because it standardizes how you enter things, standardizes how you store things, standardizes how you report on things. So I think software in this day and age should be the first step, not paper. You definitely have to think about what your system looks like and what the inputs are and what the, you know, what the process is, what the outputs are. But if you're not talking about doing that with software, you're asking for errors and inefficiencies and difficulty sharing the data. So enter Internology, if I said that correctly, Michael.
You did. Well done. Your
team went through a rigorous, I'd say we wanted it to be a 2-month process. It was more like a 6-month process. It was very competitive. There were companies from all over the world that you know, as far away as Australia and some in Europe that competed on this bid. You folks came out on top. So tell us, you know, one, why you guys wanted to bid on it, where you folks are at, what you're going to build for us, and you know, let's jump into those details.
Thanks, Nelson. First and foremost, Ms. May say, on behalf of our team at Internology, thank you for trusting us on this one. I think this is a really exciting project for us. It's very meaningful for me. As many of you know, I've come from industry. I haven't been in technology my whole life. I spent 10 years in oil and gas, 2 years in manufacturing, 5 years with a major mining company. And through those years, I was always extremely frustrated about how difficult it was to measure and communicate performance information. And I see performance information as being perishable. So to Werner's example earlier, where we have a fatality and then 6 years later information comes out, that information is maybe not as useful as it would have been 3 days later. And really what we're aiming to solve here is, how do we deliver that last mile of information? We know we've captured it all, but how do we get that into the hands of people so they're not looking for it, that it's easily accessible, and is appropriate for the tasks that people are doing? And that's where we really see the opportunity here with this project. Again, this project, to touch on all the personal stories, and Lorianne, I particularly like the one that you shared about. This is not just an individual, but it's a community, and it's an industry that suffers as well. But we see this as the start of something that we can do across the sector. It can go beyond health and safety into tailings, into social performance, into environment. We see this as being a real great Trojan horse for the CIM, and for the industry and industries at large. So again, we're certainly honored to be partnering with you. Thank you for following up on all of our references as well. Some organizations don't do that. But yes, and just to kind of give a bit of background on InterKnowledge, who we are. We're an AI and performance visualization company. We've been around for about 25 years. Most people would know us as the company that built out the CNN election wall. And for the last 15 years, we've been doing the foundational building blocks of AI. So that ability to create a decision-making experience that one person can easily connect with, multiple people can easily connect with, but then groups of people, large groups of people can easily connect with. That's what we've been doing across multiple sectors in broadcast, enterprise, and now in mining and energy. So that's a quick background on us. Nelson kind of highlighted the broad steps that we're going to take, and we look forward to receiving all the inputs that are coming from this community, because it's going to be the kind of the community effort that gets us to where we want to be.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and I can't stress enough how competitive that process was. Like you folks came out on top. IK came out on top, but it was close. It was tight, and
we understand how stressful it was.
Yeah, so no pressure, but you guys got a tall order ahead of you now, because we want to. You know, I'm pretty typical conversation I have with vendors is, I want this much, but I only want to pay that. So, you know, deliver on that and in a certain time without making any changes or going over budget. And, you know, the CIM's been extremely supportive. We've got the right budget in place. I think we've got the right team in place here. And maybe, Michael, maybe you can just give us a little bit of a verbal breakdown on what that process looks like to develop the software that we're going to build, and
yeah,
you know, the high level milestones.
Yeah, so we will be working off of our command center platform, and that's not something that we configured for you. We customize that with you, and I think that's really important, because we don't start with the data. We start with the decision makers. What do they need? What are their concerns? When do they need this information? And so we really take that human-centered design approach to this, which effectively is a system. And so therefore, with that as our starting point, we want to know who those key decision makers are, what's the information that we need, and then we can go and design the information and be able to present that information that best suits their needs. So again, I think from where we see this is, you know, how do we again present this information at the point where it's going to be most useful, where those tasks are occurring. Obviously, the frontline supervisor is going to be of huge importance here. And how do we make her life easier and safer to be able to lead her teams across not just mining, but in multiple sectors. So we'll start off with that design discovery piece. We'll then get into the architecture and planning. We'll integrate with all of the various data that are coming in. And I'm delighted to hear about the enthusiasm that tech is sharing their data with. Hopefully, that's an example that other companies can use. And Lorianne, you're going to be flooded with requests for how you can take on other companies' data as well. And then we go through an iterative process throughout that. And so again, we work with you to customize. This is not just kind of choosing drop-down boxes as a configuration exercise. And then we do some rigorous testing, and we want to be able to launch that. So when it lands, we don't need to train people on how to use it. People just simply understand, and it's intuitive, and it hits the mark. It's a big ask. Our team's up for it, and yeah, I think working together we'll be able to define where that mark is and hit it.
Yeah, Michael, I always, well, you and I have talked about this in the recent past, but you know, when we talk about software design, I always talk about polite forms and polite UI, and And what that means is, what I mean by that is, like, kids, babies pick up an iPad and know how to use it. There's there's no course, there's no 5-minute course. And, whether you agree or not that a baby should be holding an iPad or not, it's a different issue, but the software is that intuitive. And so that's one of the reasons why we selected you folks, right, is because we're going to develop something that, if you know how to use a web browser and you can get to a link, then you're good to go and you'll get the data you want. And want to create a frictionless experience, if I could use the software development term, right, where people go somewhere quickly, get what they need, and move on with their day. That's the idea here.
Yeah, typically, if you require an army of consultants or an army of trainers to drive home something, it's not that good of a something.
It's not the greatest system, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions coming in here, but before we move on, I just want to reiterate, because a couple of questions are focused on the link. So for people that aren't familiar with this UI on GoToMeeting, there's a little chat box I think it depends on where you're at, but I think it's in the upper right corner of your screen. There'll be a little question mark in it, or it'll look like there's two little chat boxes, like there's a little chat box icon. So you click on that, and that's where we've submitted, or that's where we posted the link for folks. I've also specifically answered a few of the questions that came in saying, I don't know where the link is, I can't find it. But we will share that. Or we have shared that already, I believe. I think Michelle already shared it on the chat. So take a look for that, folks, and find it. There's a really good question that came in here around, how do you feel that regulators can add to the initiative? My response to that would be very simply put, we looked at meeting, and we have met with NRCan and I think the mining folks in Ontario. This is about a year ago, and we did a presentation for them. There were about 80 or 90 people on that call. We got 10 minutes, and then we had a Q&A session. And then we sent some emails out, but never heard back from anybody. But ultimately, I'll turn this over to Warner a little bit. The philosophy that we've taken is, if we can build something and prove it out and get some industry partners and then start collecting the data, then we can go to all the different regulators. One of the critical issues we've run into over the last couple of years as we've been planning this project has been, how do you get, all the provinces and territories talking the same thing? Because Canada doesn't federally regulate health and safety data collection. Very similar to, during the COVID pandemic, every province or territory was reporting things separately, and then there were numbers that people were pulling together. But there's no federal regulation like there is in the States, like MSHA in the US, where you get a flash report. And so we are going to be stealing with pride from MSHA when we get this thing built. Well, ideally, it might not be in the first pass, but once we've got enough data in that system, in that database, we start publishing it, we'll be able to have a dashboard. One of the features that I've asked for is a subscription to the dashboard, so you can get a notification on when there is a fatality moving forward, right? So we want the historical data from companies. We also want partner companies to come on board, and we don't know exactly how we're going to collect that data yet. We're going to make it, again, as easy as possible for companies to share the right data with us. And there will be the privacy agreements and the data usage agreements and all the things that come with that, that we're going to flesh out as we get into it. Because I'm sure not every company will be, tech. Like I said, we asked for tech to, we kind of said, well, you're partnering with CIM. Would you want to partner with us on this? And they said, yes, here's all the data. I was like, well, that was easy. So I don't know if there's going to be more like that. I hope there are, but that'll be a good problem to have if we get flooded with data on day one. When we start approaching folks. But that's, we're going to go through a process there in the new year, in parallel to what Michael's doing and what Emily's doing. We're going to have this parallel process with Lori's team, and we're going to kind of pull all those together. And our philosophy was really around creating it and then going out to the regulators later saying, we've got this thing, can we start standardizing the laws in Canada? So I hope that answers the person's question that they said, how can regulators help answer? I guess it doesn't answer your question, it answers where we're going, but I think I'll turn it over to Warner on how he believes regulators can help, but I think it's policy changes. But go ahead, Werner.
Yeah, I mean, look, you talk to government agencies, they're all very supportive of what we're doing, right? But as you mentioned, right now, the coroners in each province are responsible for doing the reports. It's all provincial when there is an incident. Ideally, what we like to see is this thing, right now it's on a voluntary basis. So we're asking companies, and Lorianne's doing the partnership and getting companies to volunteering this. I would like to see this in the future being mandatory, much like MSHA does it, and the same thing, the Australian jurisdictions do the same thing. So this would be an easy forum. It wouldn't cost the government anything. I mean, the government's always looking at ways of reducing their costs. Hopefully, down the road, 10 years down the road, the government will actually take it over. I mean, our objective is just get the information out. It really doesn't matter who does it. Right now, we're the only ones that seem to be able to coordinate all this, and we've got everybody on board, and we get the funding for it. So I'm really excited to see Michael and Emily, let's get this thing going so we actually produce something earlier next year rather than later next year. And I think this is a great opportunity for everybody. Yeah, and I kind of look at this as like wildfires. Right now, each province is responsible for wildfires, but there's a lot of talk right now about having a government agency manage wildfires. I mean, this is the same scenario.
Yeah, it's similar from a perspective of we want to centralize one source of truth and have the provinces and territories enforce it ultimately to keep it sustainable over time. But I don't want to, like, we definitely didn't want to start there, right? Because that you can spend a lot of time and get nowhere versus because of all the different politics involved and how long it takes to do things in government. That's not a knock at government. That's how policy should work. It should be slow and it should account for everything. But if we want to move fast and get something in place and be wrong and fix it and improve it over time, the way to go is industry. And so that's the philosophy we took, and that's how we're moving forward. There's another question that came in, a really good question. But before I get to it, the link that if anybody can't find the link, Michelle is going to send out this post-incident, I'm thinking incidents, post-webinar email will have the link in it for the industry. So please share that with everybody. Great question here. Accident investigations will differ company to company. How will you ensure data consistency? So I'm going to start with Emily on that one and then maybe move to Lorianne, and then Michael can add something if he wants. But Emily, how would you want to answer that question? Because I've got an answer, but I'd like you to answer. You're the expert. So.
Yeah, so it's of course one of the things we've talked about pretty rigorously and at length, because of course it's not going to be necessarily possible to standardize how everybody's doing this, but we can standardize the questions that we're asking when we go through the AI process and how the report is then into the system with Michael's group. And so because of the way we formatted our own survey, we basically asked the most robust list of potential features that a company could be including in their accident investigation, asking which ones you're already doing, which ones you think have value in an anonymized scenario. And then we're going to collate all of that and use that to create our own document standard of what we're saying is kind of the best practice in this use case for it. And that's going to allow us to kind of cut across some of those differences. That being said, there still might be data gaps that exist inside of it, but that's also okay. We don't necessarily need the exact same information from every single use case, because as we learn and the knowledge base grows, those gaps get filled in by other similar scenarios.
Yeah, Lorianne, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand how people work with data, and data for one person is not the same as data for another. And, you know, even if you spell things wrong, as far as the computer is concerned, it's a completely different data set. So, it's a valid question, but, the way that Emily has structured the ask about the survey, the way that we're looking to work towards getting a standardized piece of information, I think it's going to help bridge some of those gaps. And the more information we have, the more robust that view will be. But from my own experience, I work with globally, and our company has 150 countries that have operations, and every country has a different legal system and reports differently, and not always in English. So putting all of that information together when I look at our safety landscape has given me a taste of what's possible. But really, when you start looking at, we talk about, some standardizations that, based on what's coming back from the industry, and we start saying, okay, you say it this way, this way, this way, but AI can say, well, that's this bucket. And this is how we will show it. And I think that's really how it's going to move forward. You may not necessarily have exactly the same process or exactly the same name, but it should fit within this group. And that group is what we will report on.
And just one of the other pieces of the work that Lorianne and I are working on together with a few others on the team is creating additional standards documents that are going to take that kind of information of, oh, everyone says it in these different ways. Our standard definition for the portal is going to be this, and it encapsulates all of those other features to it. And so we're going to have really rigorous documentation that helps support the education piece on it as well. And that, how our data cleaning process is going to look will be based off of those standards.
Yeah, a mapping process, basically.
Yeah, I would definitely want to add that we've been working with Gord Winkle as well over how do we approach this, right? And he has solved this problem in the past in the oil and gas industry, and so we're going to lift from that and exactly how you explained it, right? We're going to group things that some companies are close enough, or the way I look at it is, the software is going to accept specific pieces of data, and regardless of where that lives on your form, like if there was a fatality, that's a 1 or a 0 according to either something happened or it didn't. And so we're going to be boiling down that whatever we build to get to that very simple but not simplistic state of what happened, here's the data that we need, can the report that we're getting get the data from that report, regardless of where it sits on that report or how it's structured. And so we're not trying to get too fussed, especially in this day and age with, you can upload even folks, I think most folks have iPhones these days, right? You look at a picture that you took on your iPhone, you can copy and paste the words from it. It's got facial recognition. It's got every tag that you can imagine is part of that data. And that's on your personal iPhone. It's a residential, it's commercial use. It's not an industrial use, right? So the stuff we can do with, internology, I'll toss it over to Michael to see if he wants to add anything to that, but there's a lot of fun things we can do with software nowadays.
Yeah, Nelson, thanks. I think the one word listening to the answers from Emily and Lorianne that keeps coming up is guardrails, right? And from an AI standpoint, you want to have really strong QA guardrails that are your subject matter experts. And that's how the data is going to be stewarded throughout from capture to consumption. And the only other thing I'll add to this is, and I know a lot of industries are looking to do this as well, so this is not anything new, but we can't just accept trying to learn from failure. We've got to be able to learn from successful work as well, because within successful work there's failure. There's just hasn't been failed outcomes. So I think that's going forward, that would be one of the next things that we want to be able to look at is how do we learn from successful work and not just failed outcomes as well.
Yeah, well, that's a great statement, because what we are focused on right now are the very easy, discrete fatalities.
Yeah.
And then eventually it'll be, okay, how do we standardize on a definition of serious injury? And I know there's been some work done on that there was the Safety Roundtable. There was another group called Safety Working Group that was DSS was leading a few years back. Like there's been work done on this that we can, stand on the shoulders of. And then there's the potential for fatal or potential SIF, or what I hear people now say in the industry, they say PSIF. And I'm like, that's another acronym I'm not going to remember or mess up. But it's one of those things that if we can start learning from that, where things almost happened but didn't, and again, publishing that as part of as the learnings. It's all about basing our decisions on data and managing that risk moving forward and making it. The key is making it public, right? Is getting it away from, there's a company, and if you pay them $100,000, they'll give you the data. It's like, philosophically, I'm like, nobody in the mining industry, everybody I've ever talked to in the mining industry, when it's one company to one company, everybody's extremely shared. Like there was 10 years ago, I went to an Anglo Plat site in South Africa, and they shared how they did everything from a maintenance and asset management perspective. They didn't hold anything back. There was no NDA to sign. We just had to go there and learn from them. And it was really enlightening to see what it looks like when it's built versus not, right? And some people go, well, that's industrial tourism, but I think there's a lot of value in that when if you focus on what you want to learn and then go learn from it, and you have a willing party, it's like, come on our site and we'll show you what we do. We're not perfect, but here's what we do, right? And so wouldn't that be great if there was some centralized not-for-profit organization in Canada, like, I don't know, CIM and the HSS, to drive forward this source of truth moving forward over time and eternity, right? Forever. Like the idea is that this is a sustainable thing, and in 100 years, our grandkids are, well, you know, people used to die in this industry. Can you believe it? Like, so anyway, I don't think we have any more questions coming in, and I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so we're almost at time for 1 o'clock, and I'd like Michelle to do her wrap-up piece without feeling rushed for once. I usually go right to the top of the hour, and then people start dropping off and they miss the most important part, is what's next. So Michelle, back to you. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you, Nelson. And thank you to our panelists. Lorianne, I apologize about your job title, but I gave it to Nelson in the chat and he got it in for you, that you're at Epiroc. Warner, Emily, and Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. Also, a special thanks to Pan American Silver for sponsoring today's episode of the Safety Share. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and ask that you please fill out the short survey that pops up on your screen at the close of the webinar. A link to the video recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow, as well as the survey link that Emily spoke of, and hopefully the poster that she would like me to send. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it onto this platform. Anyway, and I'd also like to ask you to, I hope you will join us on January 22nd for the first episode in season 4 of the Safety Share, where guests from the CIM Health and Safety Society will talk about the initiatives for 2026. So carrying on from this webinar. A link to register will be in your email tomorrow as well. We hope to see you there. Enjoy the rest of your day, and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I heard season 4 is when it gets good, so.
Thank
All right,
you,
folks,
everybody.
take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.